It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. Appreciate you riding with us. If you're streaming with us on our site, glad to have you on board. Always nice to see you folks out there. I see Mission Viejo. Nice shout out to those folks. Boy, it's early in the morning out there. We're having a snowpocalypse, as I understand it, down in the Atlanta area. And I see some folks down in that area. I guess they're sitting home, waiting to get inundated with snow. Fort Wayne, Indiana, Chesterfield, Lincoln, I think that's Nebraska. Ennis, Texas. Thank you, Ennis. Glad to have you on board this morning. Michigan, I see Spokane out there. Seattle, I see Washington, D.C. Oh, that's probably government fellas or ladies. I see some folks out there in Florida. So anyway, welcome on board. Thank you for riding with us. Just a quick update on Patriot FB. They are experiencing some server jams that have kind of delayed their getting back up, but they have assured me that they'll be back up in the next day or so. So thank our friends over there at Big Country 99, the Rooster Radio Network. Outstanding group of folks, and glad to be a part of that system and that network, and proud to be a rooster, shall we say. So, and we're going to talk about a few different topics this morning. For the record, we're going to have in the second and third segment, I'm going to do or play for you a pre-recorded interview, which I did with General Vallely. Now, General Vallely, for the record, is the gentleman who is he's a retired general. He's a fairly well-known commentator on many news channels. He has a proposal for a new concept called a no confidence vote in Congress. So we're going to talk a little bit with him during that period. This is a pre-recorded interview, and the reason that it's taken me this period of time to play it back for you is that simply I was sick and I was out for a week, and so we had to do some work in production and so forth and so on. We're going to introduce it and play it today in its entirety, and then we're going to upload it again in its entirety to our YouTube channel and our website at americasvoicenow.org and so forth. I encourage you to watch it, share it with your friends. I'd like to hear your comments on it and your feedback as well. There were two other interviews that we did during that same period in time just before I went out on sick, and that was with Colonel Riley from the Take Back America group, and also a specific article that was written and it was published at the Journal Sentinel online. Now, and I apologize to all of you folks. John Dietrich was the guy who I did the interview there about an ATF sting that was done in Milwaukee. So we'll play those as we go forward, probably tomorrow and Friday. So, I apologize again for those of you who, to John Dietrich and Colonel Riley and General Vallely, because, well, I couldn't help being sick, and that's that. So, okay, let's talk about where we are this morning. For those of you who are just waking up and are not aware of it, yesterday the House passed at 220 to 201 against. They passed a brand new clean debt ceiling bill, which essentially gives Obama a blank check. 221 of our House members voted to give the emperor, who is apparently wearing no clothes, a blank check. The estimates are that he will utilize that to borrow anywhere between $1 and $1.3 trillion additional dollars. Now, for the record, ladies and gentlemen, you know, we're already at $17.3 trillion right now. So that would put us at about $18.5 trillion assuming for argument's sake that the estimates are correct, that it will be north of $1 trillion. They just passed a $1 trillion farm bill. I mean, folks, is this out of control or what? All the tough talk, all the threats, all the bluster, all the talking smack, all the bluffing, it's done and it's over. These carpetbagging two-bit shysters had absolutely no problem selling you and your family and your birthright down the drain. I'm ashamed to say that these people are allowed to represent us. I'm ashamed, and you should be too. This is inconceivable. You know, what possibly could be their short-term gain? What possibly could motivate them to betray you in this manner for what? What could possibly be the payoff? Is it the keeping of their secret? Is it a seat at the table as the phoenix of tyranny rises from the ashes of liberty that they know is coming in an economic collapse? What is it that would motivate men and women sworn to maintain and uphold an oath to protect and defend you? What would motivate them to sell themselves out, to become a Judas Iscariot? What could possibly be the price? I'm always blown away by that. I cannot conceive of any situation where I would be willing to put my honor, my integrity, my self-esteem, my self-respect on the line like that. There is nothing you can offer me in this world, nothing, that would make me do that. There is nothing you can expose about me in this world that would make me be willing to do that. Nothing. And yet they've done it. 221 of them. 201 said no. But was that because they went to the speaker, John Boehner, and said, listen, John, we're vulnerable. We're up for election. We can't do that. We're in the risk district. So find somebody else, get it passed, that's fine, but give us absolution. I don't know. I'm sure 3, 4, 5, 8 had good intent. The rest of them, I wouldn't give you a plug nickel for. Out of 435, we're lucky if there's 5. And that's the truth. We'd be lucky to count 5 righteous men in that city of the damned. You know, I heard, and this may be a little bit of an aside, but it's pertinent and relevant. I heard a discussion last night about how the Redskins football team, you know, everybody's against them, change the name, blah, 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 blah. They've been at this since the 70s. The American Indian and the Native Americans who for the most part, and the vast majority have come out and said, I don't get the controversy. We don't really care whether they're called the Redskins or not. It's not a big deal to us. But the media wants to keep hounding on it. The liberals want to keep hounding on it. Anything to keep the phantom alive that there is a real controversy there. And there's not. The media is anxious to keep something moving that they can talk about, that they can throw someone under the bus for. The percentage of Americans who actually care is so minuscule, folks, it's hardly recognizable as a blip on the overall radar screen. And instead of talking about real issues, like the fact that we're already $17.3 trillion in debt and these knuckleheads are going to go borrow another trillion, they're sitting there raging about the Redskins football team name. The United Nations has gotten involved. The truth is, this is all nonsense. It's all a shell game. It's all misdirection, propaganda, and gamesmanship. There's no truth or substance to any of it. And when you talk about, the fact that the media will not talk about the real issues. Yesterday, and a couple of weeks ago, Snowden did an interview in, I believe it was in Germany. And during that interview, he made some very, very amazing statements. What's really important about that issue is that it was banned from play here in the United States. None of the mainstream media even talked about it, much less played it. The propaganda was in full swing. Full swing. It was kept from you. This is the guy that everybody says is guilty of treason. And he does a 30-minute interview, and nobody plays it? You don't want to hear from the traitor himself? Really now? I mean, it's inconceivable that the media would be willing to hide that kind of information unless there was some reason for them not to give it to you. It's inconceivable that 221 members of the House would vote to spend us even further into the hole of oblivion, without so much as putting a check on and say, you know what, we'll pass this thing, but you got to scratch the bailout for the insurance companies. Or we'll pass this thing, but you, Mr. President, have got to stop making executive changes to a law that you have no constitutional authority to change. But no, we don't want to go there. We're just going to pass it with no questions asked. Imagine the pressure. Imagine the face-to-face meetings, because they don't dare have these meetings on a telephone call. And they don't even have them in their offices. I mean, the parks must have been full. You're going to pass this thing. Or those photographs that we have, or you're going to pass this thing because we paid you to do it. And you're going to uphold your end of the bargain, Mr. and Mrs. Representative. That's the arm twisting that's really gone down in Washington. The number of arms pressured up against their backs while they screamed "Uncle" must have been echoing all the way to the western side of Maryland. What would possess an individual to approve that? These are the same individuals who sit there every day and say, my goodness, this is unconscionable. You're spending our grandchildren's money. You're spending us into the brink of disaster. And then they turn right around and say, but okay, here's another blank check. Really? There's no logical path to arrive at this action based upon prior statements. You cannot have those statements made by individuals who allegedly represent us and then have them pass a vote like this. There's no way that you can get from A to B utilizing logic and reason. None. So that means, and if we hark back to the show I did a week or so ago on Occam's razor, that means that there must be another factor. What is that factor? We don't know. And for every one of the 221 who voted against it, and probably the vast majority of the 221 who voted for it and the 201 who voted against it, it's probably something different. What is the weak trigger button for each one of them? Have no idea. But I can tell you this. There's got to be one. This was not ideology. Even the Democrats and the liberals are looking at this debt and saying, my goodness, it looks like Mount Everest. The CBO director has come out and, interestingly enough, made the following statement. A large and growing federal debt could produce a fiscal crisis. Wow. Really? I mean, who'd have thunk? So what you're saying is giving the emperor a blank check might actually produce a fiscal threat to the nation? See, here's what you need to remember, folks. Every single member of government, whether they are elected or employed, every single member of the mainstream ministry of propaganda, the MOP, the media, every member, every owner, and every partner in the Federal Reserve, everyone in the financial industry, they're all responsible. They're all guilty. Guilty. Guilty of betrayal. Guilty of self-interest over the benefit of, in most cases, the oath they took. You can call it whatever you want. I spell it treason. Because, you see, you don't have to have a physical enemy to aid and abet. It doesn't have to be Russia or Al Qaeda or China. It doesn't have to be the Japanese. It doesn't have to be the Germans. The debt, the Federal Reserve, that is the enemy. At least of our fiscal livelihood. Spend yourself into oblivion, what are you going to get? And these are the perpetrators. These people who are all the members of Congress, all the workers in government, all of them. That's not fair. You can't say everybody's bad. Yes, I can. And I just did. And if you don't like it, find yourself another channel to listen to or watch. The truth is, everyone who works for government and plays even the smallest role of a cog in the giant wheel is responsible. Just as much as these people up there. Because you're unwilling to do that which you ought to do. Why aren't you, who works for the IRS, printing out all of the secrets that you know and exposing that? Why aren't you, who works for the EPA, who knows there's dirt going on, spilling the beans? Why aren't you, who works for the Pentagon or the military or the aerospace industry? Why aren't you, who's an aide to a congressman or a senator? Don't tell me you're not guilty. You have guilty knowledge. These are the perpetrators of the coming fiscal collapse that will occur in the United States of America. And they will be responsible for the subsequent pain, the horror, and the death that will run and roll over this nation like a tidal wave. Good luck to them. Because at the end of the day, there's no salvation for that. There's no forgiveness. There's just no way we're going to come back in just a moment or two. We're going to bring on General Vallely in that interview. This is a pre-recorded interview, and it's an important one. It's going to be in two parts. So our second and third segment will be in reference to General Vallely and his a discussion related to the issues surrounding his proposed resolution in the House for a no-confidence vote to bar and block President Obama for any further damage to the United States. He also talks quite candidly about some things related to the Middle East and so forth and so on. Our fourth and final segment will be the DHS has just placed an order for 141,000 rounds of sniper ammunition. And here's my question. I want to know who exactly is the target. Because the DHS has no international mandate or permission to operate outside the United States. So 141,000 rounds will be fired in anger here domestically. I want to know who's going to be the recipient of that little care package. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll bring on General Vallely's interview. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you help and support our sponsors. You can find those folks by going over to the Battery Station. You can visit their website at batterystation.com. You can also call them at 417-257-7799. You can also get a hold of our friend Jason Henry over at Henry Law Offices. He is on the square in West Plains, 417-256-4100. You can contact our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. Get yourself a great haircut for $10. 417-372-2027. The Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop, which is directly behind the barbershop there. And they can also ship to you, and they have all kinds of accessories and great stuff. 417-257-1776. Make sure that you contact our friends or visit our friends over at Mini Mart Express 1 and 2. Mini Mart Express 1 is on 14 and 63 in the old Granny's Cafe building. They have a brand new drive-thru. Make sure that you visit there, and also the drive-thru at their other location, Mini Mart Express 1, which is directly in town on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, right across the street from the City Pool. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, I think we'll be able to cover this. If you are interested in supporting and or working with America's Voice Now, if you'd like to advertise with us, certainly we'd love to have you. You can contact me by sending me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can also leave me a message on our voice hotline, 417-204-5130. And you can work with us to create an advertising campaign that will cover you not only during our broadcast area, but in all the other ways that we stream, as well as on Big Country 99, where you can hit a local audience in that region as well. If you'd like to utilize our listen line, please feel free to do so. That phone number is 415-325-0725. You can call it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can listen to America's Voice Now, or at least the latest episode, at your leisure, at your convenience. As soon as you dial in, it starts your own private playing of the program. So join us. We'll be back in just a moment with General Vallely and the interview part 1. Our next segment will be part 2. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We'll be right back. All right. We return. So, there's been a lot of activity going on recently with General Vallely, as well as the Colonel Riley project for taking back America. As you know, the American Spring Group, which is really not General Vallely's direct connection, has been interested in creating a national day of or not a day, but a permanent protest in Washington, D.C. until our government capitulates and says, okay, we've had enough. we're leaving. In addition to that, General Vallely has come out, and he was recently at the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition, and he was at the convention there, and he made a speech, and he talked in reference to a House-led parliamentary-style vote of no confidence. Now, for the record, there is no precedent for that in the United States, so it's a new concept. But the idea of having a no confidence vote would enable, at least at that point in time, the Congress to say we have a tool in our toolbox that can enable us to stop the activities that are going on here. Now, whether or not Congress would actually use that tool, I'm not sure. I mean, quite candidly, yesterday they passed a House budget, or they passed the lifting of the debt ceiling. So the question is, and they didn't have to do that. I mean, honestly, I keep hearing that, the president is operating lawlessly, but I don't see anybody doing anything to stop it. If they wanted to stop it, all they got to do is say, that's it, we're not spending another nickel until you quit. That's it. The House has the right to close the purse strings. Now, if they're afraid of American, response, that's on them. I mean, if they're afraid that the press is going to put them up on a pillory and burn them alive, hey, I can't help that. Quite frankly, if you're not willing to do the hard things that are necessary, then you shouldn't be in that role. You shouldn't be a member of Congress. Retire and go home. Go back to being an ambulance chaser back in your home district. That's ultimately really all you are anyway. A shyster in a suit. It's a $2,000 suit, but that's really all you are. This no confidence vote would open up an opportunity to have a tool that could be used to bar the president from further action. Not sure whether or not will utilize that tool. That's the question. But I applaud Vallely's concept of saying we've got to do something to rein this in. When that initial discussion was had, and this was going back into the middle of January where he's made this original announcement. Now we are almost a month later. Since then, the president has gone out, and there's been another, 12 or 14. I mean, there's 29 right now, just related to Obamacare alone. Actions by the president, which were well outside the scope of his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution. How do we stop him? How can he be stopped? Well, I'm all for moving ahead in a pincer movement, shall we say. And when I say that, I mean we should make no mistake about the idea that we need to approach this from all sides. We need to not only approach them directly from the front in a frontal assault, but we need to approach them from their flank. We need to surround the enemy of liberty and freedom, which is tyranny. And it's expressed in this presidency. There is no other way to look at it. There are those who are his supporters will say whatever he wants to do is okay. I challenge you to look honestly at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, if this was the other way around, if this had been President Bush, would you be as willing to accept this behavior from him? I don't think so. I really don't. So, I apologize to General Vallely in advance because this was recorded going back about 10 days, and I was out sick and lost some time there, and so I would have played it for you sooner, but was unable to do so. So, without further ado, we're going to bring General Vallely on. This particular interview is pre-recorded, so we can't take any questions or calls about it. We will pause in the middle of it and take a quick commercial break because it's too long for one segment, and then we'll return on part 2. All right, General Vallely.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's a privilege for me to be on your show. In discussing the what I call the State of the Union, and if we look at it from that standpoint, we have to look at the Republic. We have to look at our government and how they're functioning now, and in many cases not functioning. We have to look at a government that continues to legislate rather than delegislate, regulate rather than deregulate. And the study that we've done in Stand Up America over the last 2 years that we have finished up reflects that 47% of the federal government, Michael, could be done away with and we wouldn't miss it. But with the lack of leadership in not only the executive branch but throughout the Congress, we basically at this point in time have a broken government. So the question is, what are we going to do about it as American citizens? Are we going to wait and let the natural the status of voting turn everything around, wait for the votes to come in 2014 and 2016? Or do we continue to go down each day as we watch the news and as things seem to get worse? So what we're looking at is a no confidence vote legislation in Congress now, because we know impeachment won't work because of partisan politics. So what we're looking at, Michael, are alternatives, how to change our government, take control of it, and put some mature common sense leadership there in Washington.
Now, when we talk about a no confidence vote, we don't have a process for that. That's typically something we hear about as a parliamentary rule in Merry England across the pond. How would we develop something like that here? Because there's no constitutional authority for it, and I would gander that it's probably going to be a difficult sell to the people in Congress because of the political division.
Well, no, that's a great point, and that's where even in the Constitution, our forefathers really probably, and even in their own minds, couldn't conceive of an American government that completely breaks up and is dysfunctional, corrupt, and inept. And so with the impeachment in there and the partisan politics, it's not going to work in 2014 and in the future. But in private life, in corporations, businesses, if the leadership is not working, you can't let it continue, or else the business goes under, just like our country is right now. It's $18 trillion in debt, no friends in the world, nobody trusts us. Congress that can't get anything done. We haven't had a diplomatic victory since the wall went down from our State Department since the early 90s. And so when we look at a totally broken federal government, what do? Well, we got to stand up as citizens and Americans and say, okay, if you're not going to impeach the parties, then you've got to have a resolution in Congress that we do something like a no confidence vote and put that into our laws. So with that in mind, or we can wait around and hopefully put other leaders in, elect them again, but I'm not confident we have the mature common sense leaders that are going to run for office anymore. I'm not confident in the ones we have now that they're proposing out there.
Well, and it's funny that you mention that, because it almost seems like those people that would be qualified to run for office and have the right level of integrity and honor and interest in doing the job for the right reason, they're frightened away from it, because they look at Congress now and they say, why would I possibly want to jump into that viper's pit?
Well, that's exactly right. But we do have people, if the conditions were right, they would run. We have many corporate leaders. We have retired senior generals and admirals that have all the training as far as national security, running multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar budgets, have been through all the schools that certainly are born and matured leaders. We don't have that in the people that are running for Congress. I mean, I can name a few that I like Senator Cruz. He's got a lot of possibility. He's got a lot of common sense. He's educated, but put together a partner with him that knows national security, because the two key issues right now are national security, protecting America from the threats external to America, our borders, the threat from Iran, for example, the threats coming from radical Islam. So when you look at the external threats, then we look at the internal threats, and that's basically a collapse of our government, a collapse of the financial system. So those threats you have to examine and say, well, what are we going to do about it? The Egyptians did something about it. 33 million people stood up, a no confidence vote. in Morsi and said, we are not going to tolerate the Muslim Brotherhood. Thank God they had the Egyptian army came in, prevented a civil unrest, put in an interim government, are now building a new constitution, and they'll have new elections this year.
Well, one of my
format is there. The only other alternative, if things continue to get worse, we could have a revolution in this country.
Well, and I believe that at this point we're seeing the real possibility of that beginning to emerge. I mean, I believe that there is enough unrest at this point, and quite frankly, were there to be some sort of a natural disaster or some kind of a catastrophic terrorist attack or something that would be the inciting, the catalyst, if you will, that would light that powder keg, I could easily see that occurring. Financial collapse is at this point almost a question of imminent. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when at this stage.
That's right.
So the concern I think I have with the no confidence issue, and perhaps you can alleviate this for me and my listenership, is if there's no provision for it in Congress now, are you speaking with Congress people at this point, both senators and House Representatives members, who have stood behind the idea and are promoting it actively as a resolution?
The resolution has 50-some articles in it. We're in the final draft stage of the resolution of no confidence that we will submit probably within the next week to 10 days to members of Congress. But we're trying to fill a void that's not there. We're trying to prevent a bloody revolution in this country. So someone's got to do something to correct the course that we're on. If we were the captain of a ship, if we look at, we have to be captains of our soul. We have to be masters of our destiny. And to do that, that means that we have to stand up and we're going to say enough is enough, Washington. Either leave. The other alternative that we've been pushing too, of course, is for a step down, or resignation. And we've asked for the resignation of Obama, Biden, Pelosi, Reid, Boehner, as well as McConnell.
Right.
And so, Nixon stepped down because of a forced resignation. So these are things that can be done, but the people have got to stand up, and we're finding a growing number of people around the country, veterans, organizations, even the younger people now when they look at this Obamacare. So what we see is a fueling of passion now, that realization that we must change this government. And it can't continue like this, or we are going to crush and fold just like Rome, just like the Roman Empire fell. There's a lot of comparisons to that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the 400 years it took for the Roman Empire to slide into decay. Ours is going to come a little bit more abruptly, I suspect.
Well, they say if something happens in the international and financial markets, they call the paper that the Chinese are holding the continued devaluation of the dollar. And if we have some kind of an attack, EMP, electronic magnetic pulse attack from Iran,
right,
take down our grid system and our computers, and that's what they're planning, by the way. We do have good intelligence on that. Our markets will go down in 72 hours. Look what happened on 9/11.
Right.
And that means goods stop functioning. They stop working. The flow of trades and services and goods halt. So it doesn't take long in this modern age for a government to fall apart fairly quickly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there are some other proposals I've heard out there, including the Article 5 convention type approach, where you look at constitutional amendments. I think, and I like the concept of it. I think we're a little short on time.
We are.
The constitutional amendment path is one that's rather lengthy, and it's fraught with unseen or unforeseen road bumps, including the fact that we may never quite get enough states to agree upon what those amendments ought to be.
That's right.
So, and even afterwards, I mean, those amendments can take years to approve. Another approach is a massive protest by Americans, similar to what was done in Egypt. I know that you've probably heard of Colonel Riley's approach with that.
The American Spring.
The American Spring, and of course, the problem with that, it would appear, is that we don't have a critical mass of people who are willing to sacrifice the time and the effort and the money and the energy necessary to go out there. It's like, 50% of America seems to be either on apathy pills or
Yeah.
or on the dole, or
Clueless.
both, or clueless. And so that leaves 20 or 25% of us that are actually interested enough to do something. How do we?
It only takes 1 to 2% or 5% of a population to change it historically. And if you look at past revolutions, they've always been created by overtaxation, like Rome was. You have a tyrannical government. You have the people that are downtrodden. So a lot of people in the United States say, "Well, that can't happen in America." But I'm telling you, it can happen in America.
Oh yeah.
And it could get very bloody. I think Colonel Riley, the American Spring, is probably going to be a great success, because I think it'll not only be in Washington, but it'll also be in the state capitals.
Right.
And a lot of people are very serious about arresting the people in Washington, what they call a citizen's arrest. The question is, will the military stand by the government, or they stand by the people? We know inside the government now they're doing surveys, and they're asking some of our soldiers to sign off on a document in regards to firing on the American people in case there is an uprising. So we know that's happening in Homeland Security. I talked to a young lieutenant from Tennessee yesterday, and he was at Fort Campbell, and they were going to make him sign that document, and he said, "No, I'm not going to do it, because the Constitution, the American people come first." And so he's back now. He's with the National Guard, because the National Guard's a state asset, and he doesn't have to sign that document. But that's the purge. That's the types of things that are going on in our military, by the way, and the morale is very bad. The highest rate of suicides, 349 suicides last year in the military.
It's amazing. The suicide rate is almost as high as the death rate from Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean,
it's horrible.
It's unbelievable. It's interesting that you brought up that issue of the National Guard, because I'm in Missouri, and yesterday our governor gave out an executive order that he's going to now incorporate our National Guard into drug enforcement activity within the state. And major cities are signing memorandums of understanding to utilize our National Guard for drug enforcement in the state of Missouri. Now, to me, that is about as tyrannical a move as you can look at from a state governor. When you're talking about involving the National Guard in drug enforcement, where we don't I think every community has a drug problem, but to utilize the National Guard and employ them in cities and counties and communities around the state, I think that is a very, very dangerous move.
Well, it is, and you see the executive powers that Obama is using, continually bypassing Congress. You have a very weak Supreme Court that can't seem to stand up as the third branch of government and to uphold the Constitution. So again, I said we're broken in Congress and the legislative branch. We're broken entirely in the executive branch, from the IRS to the Department of Justice to the Defense Department now, where we don't have generals and admirals standing up and saying enough is enough. Homeland Security, I mean, it's a totally ineffective federal government. And by the way, Michael, I just got back. I was with General Sisi 2 months ago in Egypt. I've had 4 trips into the Middle East. And General Sisi, he proposed to me his vision. But what he was saying is, why does America always look at the Middle East through their own eyes? Why can't they come over here and look at what's going on with Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and look through our eyes? Because we had the State Department and Obama supporting the Muslim Brotherhood against a democratic movement to change the government over there from the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, that whole issue of the Muslim Brotherhood and our support for the Muslim Brotherhood and in this regard is disturbing, in the sense that you have to wonder what is the real motivation there, because it's almost as if there's a desire to misuse or to support something which the vast majority of America would definitely not be for or be willing to promote. It's almost as if this administration is aiding and abetting them.
They are. There's no doubt about that. They've had them in the White House. We have the names. If you saw General McInerney's report last week on the infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood into our own government, you can Google it. He did an excellent interview last week on that. But certainly Claire Lopez, who you should have on sometime, she'll completely go over that profile of what's happening with our own government. And by the way, under the Bush administration, he's the one that initiated the Muslim outreach program.
Yeah.
And when they started infiltrating officers of jihadi background or Islamic background into the senior offices of the Pentagon. So it's been going on for quite a while, but at this point in time, you have a sympathetic Valerie Jarrett. You have a very sympathetic president of the Muslim Brotherhood. We have a CIA head who is a Muslim. And I'm not cascading this all across Muslims because I have Muslim friends.
Sure.
Many of them don't even go to the mosque. They're not radicals. But certainly when you see Saudi Arabia that doesn't want to have anything to do with us now, and they want to destroy Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. And then Egypt, and then you have now the chessboard up there in Syria where you have the Russians supporting Assad, Iran supporting Assad and Hezbollah. The Saudis are against Iran. And we're a non-player over there at this point in time.
All right. We're going to take a quick break in reference to, commercial breaks are required, as you know. We're interviewing General Paul Vallely. He is been working with the Congress to create a no confidence vote, which essentially is designed and intended to give Congress some tools to separate and block the president from unconstitutional activity, which we know has been problematic. His claim is that this is the first step in what can only be repaired over time, but it is an achievable goal, and in the short term, it starts to remove Obama's ability to continue the activity which he has been guilty of in terms of unconstitutional action. So we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to come back and take the second half of this. If you're capturing this on Spreaker, I'm aware that there's a challenge to the stream on that. We will make sure that we have that available for you later this morning, and we'll make sure that we have this entire interview uploaded to our YouTube channel as well. So you're listening to America's Voice Now. If you'd like to contact me in reference to this or any other programming that we do, please feel free to do so. You can contact me by sending an email to Mike at americasvoicenow.org. That's Mike at americasvoicenow.org. You can always visit americasvoicenow.org live, and we broadcast our show in live video and audio on the site every morning from 8 a.m. till about 9:45 on Monday through Friday. And you can capture the program whether you prefer the audio-only version or the video version, your preference. We also stream the show live on Patriot FB and a host of other websites. And, of course, then our show is broadcast on Big Country 99 Rooster Radio from midnight to 2 a.m. Monday through Friday. So we're going to take a break, as I'd mentioned before. If you'd like to support AVN, please feel free to do so. You can visit our website, where you can utilize the PayPal link there to make a donation to the program. You can also mail us any funding that you'd prefer if you don't want to do it through electronic means. And our address is America's Voice Now. That's P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri, 65775. That's America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. Okay, make sure that you visit our sponsors and communicate with them, because these are the folks that keep us up on the air and keep us live and moving in the right direction. We will be happy to add you to our sponsor list if you are interested in doing that. Simply send me an email to Mike at americasvoicenow.org, and in the subject line put the word advertising, and I'll be more than happy to get right back to you. We're going to take a quick break. It'll only last us a moment or two, and then we'll return with the second half of General Paul Vallely's interview. We're related to the no confidence vote and the issues surrounding American Spring. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right, America. Good morning. You are listening to America's Voice right here, right now. We're in our third segment this morning, and we are listening to a conversation and an interview which I did with General Paul Vallely about a week or 10 days ago. I was out sick for a week or so, and I apologize for the delay in terms of getting this on the air for you folks, and I apologize in advance to General Vallely. But in any event, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to play the second half of this, and if you're listening live on our website or on Spreaker or Patriot FB or any of the other outlets, just bear with us. We'll make sure that we have this up on our YouTube channel as well, and we'll upload our Spreaker corrections this morning. So without further ado, we're going to continue this discussion with General Paul Vallely, and at the end of that, we'll have some commentary in reference to the overall discussion. Hang on a second. Here we go.
You know, I cannot fathom what is our motivation for not looking at the Muslim threat in its real true sense. In other words, pretending as if it's really not there and making the agreement that has come out with Iran, we're the laughing stock with the post being put out yesterday by Iran, and basically stating that we've capitulated and we're on our knees before the Muslim world. I mean, it's you know. This was not something that we could have envisioned 10 years ago in our future.
Well, they're amateurs. You got Putin as a professional. Obama is an amateur, and there's a book out by that, by the way. Kerry's an amateur. He's over there with Rouhani. They're laughing at us, and like you said, Rouhani came out yesterday, and he said, we won.
Yeah.
The West has surrendered.
It's amazing.
Peace in our time, like Chamberlain. But they're laughing at us because we're a bunch of amateurs with an agenda.
It's amazing to me. I almost wonder whether it's ineptitude or willful intent.
It's both. It's absolutely both. It's an agenda that's run by the Obama clan, the ideology. At the same time, then you wrap that around ineptous and incompetent people like Sebelius, Homeland Security. The incompetence that we have in the IRS. Just look at the testimonies of these people.
Yeah.
I mean, you sit there and laugh that if they were in your company, they would be gone by 5 o'clock this afternoon.
My
you wouldn't
goodness.
tolerate that. So that's what I'm saying. The American people, we don't need to tolerate it either. Let's do something about it.
Right. Your no confidence proposal is one which I think has merit in the sense that if we can get the resolution passed and we can get Congress to actually hold it. I'm very concerned about the partisanship associated with that and people wanting to or not wanting to take a stand against their party alliances and so forth. And quite frankly, it's as if the Republican Party and the Democrat Party have, for all intents and purposes, merged at this point anyway.
Oh, absolutely. There's not much difference. Thank goodness we've got some good young people in Congress and the Senate now that are trying to change things, but yet you got the Karl Roves and what we call the Bushies. They want all of these Republicans in the Tea Party or Tea Partiers out. They don't want to include them, and the Republican Party basically is neutered at this time because of the likes of a Karl Rove and others that are advising some of the senior people.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, and in addition to that, it appears as if they are all on the inside know that something is about to tip the scales here, and they are no longer even pretending to represent us any longer. The level of when we look at this immigration issue and the GOP talking about how to shoehorn amnesty in, when for all intents and purposes the vast majority of America has already said that that's not a good idea. you have to question their motives. It's almost as if when you look at the NSA surveillance issues, it's my personal belief that those people who would have stood up have been compromised.
Yeah. Well, in the arrogance of them, they're so arrogant today. I met with some of our CIA people in Istanbul a few months ago, and I can tell you their arrogance of the operators out there and their lack of competence. I went inside Syria in November. I was inside. I went to Aleppo. I had 400 armed members of the Free Syrian Army with me. And I vetted everything for the government over there. But they don't listen. If you're not on the inside, they don't want to listen to you. And they have their own agenda. More and more is going to come out on Benghazi. You may know we formed the Citizens Commission on Benghazi. And we're the ones that sent the legislative suggestion to Boehner last week that he form a select committee so we can call all these people in on a subpoena, because Daryl Issa and the 5 committees that have jurisdiction over certain areas are not doing the job. They get to the 20-yard line, Michael, if I compare it to football, but they can never get in the end zone.
Right.
Fast and furious, never in the end zone. What's happened? Who's accountable? IRS, Homeland Security.
It's almost disturbing in the sense that you got to wonder whether or not this is, the plan of what they're trying to accomplish here is almost willful intent to not be effective, essentially.
It's effective to change America forever. That's their agenda. Let's not forget what Obama said. That's what they're doing. Change America forever. And we're going to say, no, you're not going to do that. That's why the American people have to stand up.
Well, and to that end, I mean, in the sense of what the American Spring is, if you have not gotten your resolution passed by April, will you be willing to support that effort?
Well, I've told Colonel Riley, and I've said that's his deal. I'm not part of it, but I told many on some interviews that I've done already that I'm for the American people standing up. It's a national call to action. And if it takes people walking to Washington, D.C., or coming in on buses, horseback, ATVs, whatever, and in the state capitals to get their attention that we're serious as citizens and we have that right as citizens to stand up, then that's what we should do. And if Colonel Riley is successful of garnering enough force to go back there, spend the time, and demand resignations, demand arrest of these people who are violating the American Constitution and law, then that's what has to be done. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen this spring, and we'll see what happens.
I'd written an article that was very similar to what Colonel Riley has promoted, and I basically had called for a massive, peaceful, civil, disobedient resistance back in April of 2011. And that particular story has garnered, I don't know, about 100,000 views, and it's now actually come full circle to the point where it's actually happening at this stage in the game. But it's so apparent at this stage in the game that we've got to take action that is going to completely change the landscape, because I really don't believe that there are political solutions that are going to be, resolvable via 2014 elections, nor even Article 5 type, conventions and things like that. I
agree.
I mean, I think at this point we've really got to get a coalition of Americans together. What, in your opinion, would be the target number for people to be able to make an impact such that the national news media, which is clearly biased, would not be able to ignore?
I think it's got to be 5 to 10 million people around the country. That's all.
Okay.
I think 5 to 10 million people, and the right coverage and the right speakers, the right leadership to guide it. I'm looking for George Washington to ride across the Potomac now rather than the Delaware. And, by God, we'll have a white horse for somebody, whoever's that George Washington, but that's what we need. And, I can tell by talking to a lot of people in the Tea Parties, a lot of organizations, they want someone to lead the effort to change this government back to where it's abiding by the Constitution, a government that has values, leadership that will strip down this massive bureaucracy that we have that is just costing billions and billions of dollars, and it doesn't get any better.
Right.
So, as Dan Hefnefer from the Wall Street Journal said in an article a couple of weeks ago, we need some big league presidents. We need some big league leadership. Right. And he's right. We don't have that. We have minor leagues. If you look at some of these guys they're putting up to be president, they're okay maybe as serving governors or congressmen, but we need somebody other than a congressman and a senator and a politician. We need a true leader like George Washington. He was a military guy that came out of retirement as a colonel. He was Colonel Washington.
May I submit, sir, that you may look good in a powdered wig?
Yeah, the way my hair's going now, you're probably right. I love white horses, too. That's the state. That's the State of the Union.
I understand. Well, I appreciate very much you taking the time to join with us today. I support your no confidence measure. I think that that's something that our group can certainly get behind, and we should push for that and try to drive that home to our representatives as much as they'll listen to us, which doesn't appear to be very much these days. But certainly we will support that. Would you just touch briefly before we go on your American Provisional Leadership Council?
Well, this was brought up to me again. I'm speaking in Myrtle Beach this weekend at the big kickoff of the Tea Party event down there. I'll be speaking in Texas. I'll be speaking in California to the Tea Parties there. But basically, it was suggested that somehow somebody put some leadership to bring the Tea Parties together. So they're looking again for a George Washington to do that. But the American Provisional Leadership Council was suggested to me that I form that with 10 or 12 of the most common sense men and women of wisdom that we have in the country, from the private sector as well as some senior retired military such as Admiral Lyons or General McInerney or General Boykin, and that we really meet probably every couple of weeks, and we'll come up with what we think the government needs to do, give them a little direction, be sort of like a board of directors for our own government, because they can't seem to do it themselves.
Right.
So that was the whole thing, and it's not a bad idea, and we could probably get a lot of support that say, hey, we're going to meet, and okay, here they have the Affordable Care Act. Here's what you guys in Congress need to do. Here's what you need to do about the budget. Here's what you need to do about Iran, and get out there and represent the American people, because unfortunately, the vast majority of these legislators in Washington are taking care of themselves and worried about the next election, and they don't listen to us. So it's just another way of coming up with peaceful ways of doing things, Michael.
May I suggest that a secondary phase to that may be to look towards, in the event that we're not successful in cleaning up the act of those who are currently in power, that under the event of an American Spring success, one of the problems that we'd have is essentially what Egypt has had, which is a void of leadership, and we don't have a provisional government prepared to step in. Now, in our case,
we do. There are people out there that are looking at that, by the way.
Well, I mean, what we should have is folks that are representing each given area that are an exact duplicate of our existing Congress, who are pre-qualified and pre-vetted, right, and have already signed an agreement similar to the pact that I had proposed, which basically states that you have accountability partners, and in the event that you violate the terms of your contract with your electorate, they already have your pre-executed resignation letter in hand. Mm-hmm. And all they have to do is date it and submit it to the press, and you are no recalls, none of that necessary. So the idea being that if you've got a provisional government pre-prepared, in the event that either there was an American Spring success or some other issue, including a national emergency or a terrorist attack, that there would be a group prepared to step in, because, as you well know, politics, like nature, abhors a vacuum.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, I can tell you, with the people that I network with, I can put together a provisional government in 24 hours, which could take charge. They're out there, believe me.
Is there a constitutional authority for that?
No, there's not. Unfortunately, there's not. I mean, there's things going around, Michael, like setting aside the Constitution for 6 months and putting in a government in power that then can make the changes necessary to get back on track with new elections and any revisions that are needed in the Constitution. But those are the things that are going out around the country. And a lot of people don't even realize that. So there's a lot of people. I mean, look at ammunition sales. I mean, people buying up guns. Obama's been the best guy we've had for guns and ammunition.
You ought to get a trophy for the best gun salesman in history.
That's right. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. That if you're living in the big urban areas, you're living in L.A. or you're living in New York, you know, you're basically have no clue what's going on out in the hinterlands.
Right, and that is absolutely the truth. Well, General, thank you very, very much for joining with us today. I'm very grateful that you spent the time with us, and I very much appreciate it. I'd love to have you back if I can impose upon you at a later date as we move further along and your no confidence vote begins to move forward. I'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Michael. We'll be happy to do it.
Thank you so very much, sir.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Bye.
All right. So I want to just thank General Vallely for his gracious interview and the opportunity to have you folks hear from him the concept of his no resolution idea, or no confidence resolution. The challenge I think that we have here is that we all are looking for solutions. We recognize and understand that at this point in time, we are fairly far down the road of a government which is, for all intents and purposes, under collapse as we speak. It's a slow motion collapse, but it is a collapse nonetheless. If you recall, during the course of the interview, we talked about how or under what circumstances could a provisional government be placed in power that would be able to replicate the existing federal government that we have today. And of course, the concerns there are that we have 535 members of the government today, which no longer ultimately represent us. I mean, we've got 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate, and roughly about 100 people in the White House that are, you know, for all intents and purposes, appointed or elected or some combination thereof, that are approved by the Senate as advisors to the president and so forth. When we look at that and the combination of perhaps as many as 500 judges in the judiciary, and that includes the 9 in the Supreme Court, we have a small oligarchy of literally less than 1,000 individuals that are running our nation, and running it, for all intents and purposes, into the ground. I mean, there's no denying at this stage in the game that we are on the edge of a political as well as a fiscal crisis. We have a constitutional crisis going on right now. Our president is operating completely outside of any boundaries that are imposed upon him in Article 2. In fact, I listened to a discussion yesterday in reference to the steps that are potentially open to our government to separate and remove the president via impeachment. And of course, the challenge there is that America does not have the will to impeach this. Now, the rank and file average electorate out there perhaps does, and there's a significant number of Americans who believe that this president should be removed from office. But remember that impeachment does not guarantee removal. We learned that during the Clinton years, where an individual can be impeached and is not necessarily, we're not assured that that individual would be removed. When you look at General Vallely's concept, he calls this a conviction without eviction, because in the case that you were to push through this no confidence concept, it wouldn't guarantee that the president would be evicted, but neither would impeachment. So at least with the no confidence measure, you would have which would be far less injurious to the nation, you would have the opportunity at that stage in the game to have the tools in the toolbox at hand to be able to say, okay, we can stop funding, we can stop and draw back the power from the executive. You know, the executive in this nation has been growing for decades now in terms of its authority and power, which is self-appointed by all accounts. Congress has been, for all intents and purposes, acceding power to the executive for decades now. In fact, when we listen to the President's State of the Union address, I was stunned to hear the president clearly state that he had the authority to act outside of Congress. In fact, he made it very clear, if Congress won't act, I will act by myself. And what was the most stunning about that was not that the president actually said that during a State of the Union address, but that the Congress stood up and clapped. These are individuals that should have heard the message loud and clear. That message coming from the president's mouth to Congress was, you are irrelevant. And yet, they stood and clapped. It was like trained seals. Who would stand and clap for their own demise? Their own the usurpation of their authority and power. Unless there was some other motivating factor. And again, I ask, who and what is the motivating factor behind the congressional actions we saw yesterday with the House vote for the debt ceiling? Who is responsible for the failure of the House to take action today? There is nothing that prohibits the House from saying, we're locking down the purse strings right now. There will be no more distributions of funding. There will be no more funding transferred anywhere, any way, in any way, shape, or form until this president begins to act in a lawful manner. But they will not do it. It's beyond my comprehension. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the most recent news today that, and you'll find this interesting, the Department of Homeland Security has put out a bid for 141,000 rounds of ammunition, but this is very clear and specific ammunition. This is what our military uses as sniper ammunition. I'm going to explain to you a little bit more about what that is and how that matters. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about who is the actual target for that. Because this ammo is meant for the termination of human lives. It serves no other purpose, ladies and gentlemen. This is not for target practice. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop, 417-372-2027. Our friends over at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop at 417-257-1776. The law offices of Jason Henry at 417-256-4100. Make sure you see our friends at Battery Station, 417-257-7799. They can be found at 303 Washington Avenue or their website at batterystation.com. Our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, where they have an outstanding lunch special every day, and you can make sure that on Tuesday evening you bring the family because kids under 12 eat free. Our friends over at the Mini Mart Express 1 and Mini Mart Express 2, both locations in West Plains, where 14 and 63 meet at the old Granny's Cafe building, and also the location directly across the street from People's Park in the city of West Plains. That's where the city pool is located. Both locations have an outstanding drive-through, so in this terrible weather we've got, you don't even have to get out of the car. Okay, you're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us live on the web every day at americasvoicenow.org. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to discuss this issue of the DHS and their latest step to incorporate 141,000 rounds of specific sniper ammunition that is intended for the taking of human life. That should alert you. We'll be right back. All right. So, Homeland Security has put out a bid to purchase 141,000 plus rounds of a very specific type of sniper ammunition. Here's the obvious question. This particular type of ammunition is meant for the termination of lives. It is meant for the killing of human beings, and no other purpose does it serve. So I want to know who they have in their crosshairs. Don't you? Is it you? Perhaps me? Who precisely is slated to be the target for this ammunition? We do know one thing. It isn't for use in a foreign war somewhere. The DHS has no international mandate. They have no ability to operate outside the United States of America. It isn't for target practice, because they can use the same essential grain weight bullet with virtually the same ballistics for about half the price. So the real question is, who exactly is the target of this ammunition? 141,000 rounds is a lot of ammo, folks. And in the hands of a sniper, this isn't spray and pray ammo. Each shot is meant to count. Now, as a guy with a lot of experience in the firearms industry and a lot of knowledge about it, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what this particular ammo is and what it's intended for, and how you will know the difference between this and some rounds that you might buy to go out and hunt deer, as an example. First and foremost, this is made by Hornady. Hornady is a premium ammunition manufacturer. They manufacture this in a .308 caliber, it's a 30 caliber round, and it's 168 grain AMAX which is called TAP or TAP ammunition. Now, the idea behind this is this particular brand of or load of ammunition has a very, very, very high accuracy rate, and it is got a tip on it that is intended to make this a life-taking round. This is not something, I mean, you can get 168 grain boat tail ammunition that you would use for target practice that would replicate this for all intents and purposes, for the purposes of practice and accuracy testing and so forth and so on. But the simple question that has to rise in your mind is, who is the intended target for this? The long-range capability of this round is out to about 1,000 yards. In most instances, you would be looking at a range that would be, you know, in most urban areas, maybe a couple of 100 yards. But the ballistics of a .308 round are well known and well documented for various bullet grain weights, all the way from about 110 or 120 grains all the way up to 200. This has been the sniper round that the United States military has used for all intents and purposes the last 30 or 40 years. The truth is, the DHS doesn't really have an excuse that is legitimate. My point to you is this. When you look at the 2 billion, and I do mean billion with a B, the 2 billion rounds that have been placed under order in the last 24 months, and you combine that with this, and you look at the agencies that have been stockpiling ammo at an astounding rate, agencies which ordinarily have no law enforcement mandate. I mean, we're talking here about the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Why exactly would the NOAA need ammunition? And I mean in the tens of thousands of rounds. I mean, where does your average weatherman or weather person need ammunition like that? Why is it that the United States of America is distributing automatic weapons and literally hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition to agencies that, for all intents and purposes, most people wouldn't even recognize that they have a law enforcement division, like the Department of Education? You're kidding me. No, I'm not. The Department of Education has fully automatic weapons, fully automatic, And in addition to that, they have their own law enforcement division, and they have in their possession hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition. For what? Give me one reason, legitimately, why the Department of Education would need a heavily armed, militarily supported law enforcement division. You see, this is the militarization of not only federal agencies, state agencies, local police departments, county sheriff's departments. Across the nation, our government is building a war machine, delivering arms, men, training, ammunition, and materiel to every tiny little pocket around the country. I've highlighted some examples where small towns and communities, I mean, we're talking cities with a population of 10 and 20,000 people, are getting heavily armored military vehicles, MRAPs, mine-resistant, ambush preventative vehicles. These are in use in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in war zones. They have a V-shaped hull on the bottom that will deflect explosions outward. They are fully armored down to the bulletproof windows and armor over the tires, armor over the doors, armor over the roof, armor plating all across the cab. They're being delivered to small towns, communities, cities, all over the nation. The University of Ohio recently obtained one. When they were asked why they would possibly need such a vehicle, they said, for police presence at football games. Really? At a football game? It sounds to me more like that's an intimidation tactic than a public safety need. Small cities and towns and villages across the country are being and acquiring this type of hardware based on the Pentagon's recent, and I say recent because it's only in the last decade or so that they've been doing this, their concept that they can take all of this material that's coming back from war zones and redistribute it. But it's the principle of redistribution of very, very dangerous gear. And when you are training and teaching local law enforcement, which has a completely different mandate than the military, and you're teaching them military tactics, they're going to use them. The problem is that the idea of what a law enforcement officer should be doing and what a military personnel should be doing is completely different. One has a mandate to go in and keep the peace. The other has a mandate to go in and destroy. And when we are sitting here teaching and training our local law enforcement entities that their job is essentially a replication of the soldier's job, we are destined to have a problem. And a problem we have. If you look at some of what we've seen over the course of the past couple of years with the level of police brutality that is going on across the nation, this isn't restricted to just places like LA and New York and Chicago. We are seeing, staggering volumes and percentages of dangerous police brutality activity that is being utilized across the nation. There have been instances, and I've talked about some of these prior. In New Mexico, there's been a rash of law enforcement where they are doing physical body searches, penetrative body searches, based on the suspicion that an individual may have drugs. We're talking about bringing, in fact, this guy just won a $1.6 million award because the police officer claimed that it appeared that he was clenching his buttocks when they pulled him over. So they dragged him to a hospital, and they said, we want this guy probed to see what he's hiding in his anal cavity. The first hospital said, we're not doing that. That's not ethical. So they bundled the guy up and took him to a second hospital, believe it or not. And in that hospital, they gave the guy 2 enemas, a colonoscopy with a camera, 2 or 3 probes with human hands, and at the end of the day, guess what, folks? They found absolutely nothing. Now, with all due respect, I'm not quite sure why you have to go into someone's body physically 6 times to determine that there's nothing there. There was another recent case also in New Mexico with a woman who was actually given enemas and then made to utilize the toilet while someone watched. Nothing was found. There have been, we can talk about cases in California where the police brutality associated with the LA Police Department and many other police departments in larger cities there is completely out of hand. I mean, there was a case the other day about a guy who is claiming that the police officer hit him with a taser in his genitals and then stood there while the guy's mother screamed for them to stop and stared at the mother while he pulled the trigger to show her he was in control. Ladies and gentlemen, that is sadistic, not law enforcement work. That's something you would see on a horror sex film, not for law enforcement to be utilizing on a civilian in the street. And all because the guy's father threw a cigarette on the ground, and the father is an Alzheimer's patient, or he's got some dementia and some physical. He's incapable of holding things in his hand. He dropped it, and they wanted to write him a ticket for $1,000 for throwing a cigarette on the ground, which he didn't throw. He dropped. When the kid tried to pick the cigarette up and say, "Look, he's not physically capable of picking it up himself," and he didn't mean to drop it, the officer tased the guy and his genitalia. What is wrong with this nation? You know, I talked to you yesterday about the fact that first blood has been drawn, and we're seeing it every day in our local law enforcement and police departments. We're seeing, for all intents and purposes, murder. If you don't know about it by now, if you're not aware of it, the death rate in the last 5 years alone, since President Obama has taken office, has exceeded the death rate that we've had in both Iraq and Afghanistan, all at the hands of police officers domestically in the United States. That's a frightening statistic. Now we have the Department of Homeland Security in possession of 2 billion rounds of ammunition, buying up isolated pockets of, and by the way, out of that 2 billion rounds, a significant percentage of it was hollow point. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you do not buy hollow point ammunition for target practice. It's too expensive. And even a government that spends with the profligacy of our government knows that. This ammunition is not being purchased for training purposes. This ammunition is being purchased for deployment purposes. The question is, who's it going to be deployed against? Again, I want to remind you, the Department of Homeland Security has no authority to operate outside the boundaries of the United States. I want to remind you that local sheriff's departments have no authority to operate outside of their own county. I want to remind you that local police departments have no authority to operate outside the boundaries of the jurisdiction that they serve. So the target must be us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is frightening indeed. We are the target. That should tell you that our nation is gearing up for a war against the people of the United States of America. We're not seeing this as small, isolated pockets and incidents. This has become the rule of the day. This has become not the exception, but the rule. The majority of the bullets that have recently been purchased by the Department of Homeland Security, one order alone amounted to 450 million rounds. Ladies and gentlemen, all of it was hollow point. They're completely unsuitable for training. One, because of their cost. They have also been forcing and creating ammunition shortages around the nation by the purchases of this ammunition in that volume. I mean, there's only so many rounds that producers can make. And when the Department of Homeland Security has an order out there that's a standing order to be filled at the earliest available convenience for 2 billion rounds, that's going to cause a shortage in the private marketplace. So this accomplishes a dual goal. One, they're outfitting themselves with ammunition that will, for all intents and purposes, take the lives of Americans. Two, they're shorting the supply that's available to Americans. And you don't have to be a poli-sci major to recognize that the concept there is to remove the supply so that the American people don't have access to it, or they can't fight back. Since they can't get the guns, the simple solution is take away the ammunition, and all of those guns become clubs. Recently, there was a company called Law Enforcement Targets. They're a contractor for the United States government, and they do business with the DHS. And they bought more than $2 million worth of targets, the Department of Homeland Security, from Law Enforcement Targets Incorporated. This was a year ago. Law Enforcement Targets, Inc. sold the DHS targets that were that depicted children, elderly gun owners, pregnant women, and young mothers. These targets were all in residential settings, and they were all holding a gun. So here's an example. A pregnant mother, obviously pregnant. I've seen the targets, and I've shown them to you on our in previous postings on americasvoicenow.org and Facebook and all these other places. These targets depict pregnant women. They depict children as young as 8 years old holding a weapon. They depict an elderly couple, an older man and another one with an older woman, clearly into the latter stages of their years, holding a shotgun. And these are targets being used for the training of law enforcement and Department of Homeland Security. $2 million worth of them. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a lot of paper. It's bad enough that they're buying these types of targets, but that they're distributing them with the anticipation that this is the threat that they're looking for. You see, the implications, folks, are tragic. When we're talking about law enforcement agencies, paramilitary agencies, groups like the IRS, who has fully automatic weapons, and literally millions of rounds at their disposal. Who's the IRS going to target with that? I mean, how is it that an organization, an administrative agency that has no constitutional authority to exist, has permission and authority to have fully automatic weapons and millions of rounds at their disposal? I mean, let's be candid here, folks. IRS tax violators are not exactly what most people would consider to be dangerous criminals. I mean, I understand if they said, well, this is for the DEA. I would understand if they said, this is for the FBI and their bank robbery division. I don't understand it when it's the Department of Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the agency that determines the weather. I don't see it when it's the post office. Are you aware that every postmaster in every tiny little town and village is fully authorized to carry an automatic MP5? In fact, most of them have them. That's right. Your little town with somewhere between 2 and 35,000 people, your postmaster and there's one stationed in every post office in the nation, more than likely has a fully automatic weapon at his or her disposal. They all have authority to obtain one. The question is, have they? We'll never know, because that's a Freedom of Information Act response that the federal government won't give out. What are all these weapons for? I mean, these are the same people who are saying that you personally are too dangerous to have a weapon in your hands. And yet they're handing them out to unelected, unaccountable, nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Individuals who they're training to take lives. Training with targets of pregnant women and children. And your parents or your grandparents. When you give a target out that shows little Johnny at 8 years old holding a pistol, and a law enforcement agent is supposed to use that for training purposes, it's unjustifiable. Okay, we're going to wrap for the day. I'll fix our Spreaker stream. For those of you that wanted to catch the Vallely interview, you'll be able to catch it up on YouTube as well and on americasvoicenow.org. Please make sure that you visit our website at americasvoicenow.org. Communicate with me via email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can call and leave a message on our listen line. You can only leave a message. That number is 417-204-5130. I do not answer it directly. If you'd like to call the show during the day, you can write this down. It's 417-204-5141. Our listen line is 415-325-0725. If you'd like to assist us with donations or financial assistance, please do. We are always desperately in need. And all this costs something to put on, folks. And if you value it, if you gain some benefit from it, then please support our efforts. You can do so by going to our website and clicking on the PayPal link, where you can make a donation one time or monthly. You can use a credit card, or if you'd prefer, you can mail us a check or however, money order or whatever. You can send that to America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri 65775. That's P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri 65775. Please make sure that you visit and work with our sponsors. Find the folks over at Express Mini Marts 1 and 2. They are both located in West Plains. One is located on the corner of 14 and 63 in Old Granny's Cafe building. Many of you are very familiar with Old Granny's Cafe. I used to have eggs there quite frequently myself. Outstanding facility there that they've got. They've got an ice cold monster beer cave. They've got liquor there and wine coolers and things like that. They also have snacks and chips and hot food. They have lottery tickets and the cheapest fountain drinks you can buy anywhere in the community for 39 cents and up. They also have a location directly across the street from the City Pool and People's Park in West Plains on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, and that is Express Mini Mart 1. There is no alcohol at that facility, but both locations have an outstanding drive-through that you can simply pull up to, and you never even have to leave the car. Visit our friends over at Battery Station. Make sure that while you're there, you swing in and ask for the co-op catalog. There should be orders going out towards the tail end of this month, I believe. And ask about the co-op catalog that's available for America's Voice Now listeners only. You can reach the Battery Station at 417-257-7799, or you can visit them at batterystation.com. Visit our friends at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, where on Tuesday night, kids eat free. Tuesdays and Thursdays, $5 lunch special. Every day, an outstanding salad bar and pizza and pasta bar. Visit our friends Jason Henry over at the law offices of Jason Henry. You can find them at number 10 Court Square in West Plains, 417-256-4100. State and federal criminal issues, as well as family issues, custody issues, and civil issues related to automobile accidents and personal injury. Our friends over at Wits End Classic Barbershop at 417-372-2027, where you can get a great haircut for $10. We'll see you tomorrow morning. God bless. Have a great day.